Today I'm going to talk to you about how a monkey god, a mountain, and the postal system can show us the way to provide health care for everyone in the world, regardless of where they are born or where they live. In the Hindu epic Ramayana, Ram's brother Lakshman lies comatose in the war against the 10-headed demon king of Lanka, Ravan. Ravan has abducted Ram's wife. Ram has stopped fighting, desolate over his brother's condition. Ravan's forces are on a rampage, killing all the army as they go along. The war is at a turning point. If Lakshman is not revived, evil will win over good. Selfishness will triumph over sacrifice. Of course, as development professionals, we can't let this happen. There is hope. Lakshman can be revived only if he is given Sanjeevani, the life-saving herb, before sunrise the next day. Unfortunately, the herb is still not yet on the World Health Organization's list of essential medicines. It's only found in the Dronagiri mountain in the Himalayas, thousands of kilometers away from the sandy beaches of Lanka. How do we get this drug in time before sunrise? Especially if we have to negotiate drug prices, patent laws, drug registration, intellectual property, export tariffs, import tariffs, and still get the drugs in time before sunrise. Hanuman, the monkey god, stands up and takes on the challenge. He leaps across the ocean, flies to the Himalayas to get the herb. Ravan, the bad guy, learns about this, and he orders the sun to rise early. So Hanuman expands his body vast enough so that the sun is blocked from rising. But when Hanuman is at the mountain, he faces another problem. He just does not know how to identify this herb. He has no lab technician, no lab support, or a rapid diagnostic test to tell him, this is it, take it and run. So he lifts the entire mountain and flies back to Lanka so that the doctor there can identify the herb and give it to Lakshman. Lakshman is saved, Ravan is defeated, Sita, the wife, is reunited with Ram, and they go on to have 2 lovely children. The leap of the monkey god Hanuman in many ways is characteristic of what the AIDS response is today. They have broken barriers, they have broken all man-made barriers, leaped across national boundaries, and removed narrow self-interest. The Dronagiri mountain reminds us that the world has the solutions. We have to find them, recognize them, and share them with all. And if faced with difficulties, be prepared to move the mountain. AIDS is the lens through which I see the world. I've done this for the most part of my life, straight out of university into the world of sex and drugs. And it has taught me something very powerful, that the work that we do here in UNAIDS and the millions of people working on HIV, not just in hospitals and clinics, but around street corners, brothels, toilets, parks, behind telephone hotlines, is not merely about stopping this virus entering from the human body, but about restoring respect and dignity of all people, with or without the virus. I believe that we can end AIDS. And I think we can do that by combining 3 different ways to do it. 1, break the rules. 2, follow the rules. And 3, create new rules of engagement. Let's begin with breaking the rules. Today, nearly 6.5 million people are on antiretroviral treatment across the world. 10 years ago, the number was just a few thousand. Treatment was a luxury, a rare commodity that you could count on your fingertips where you could get these medicines, and that too if you were lucky. On a hot summer day in Delhi, I received a phone call from the head of the AIDS program of the Indian state of Orissa. I was helping them design their 5-year AIDS plan at that time. There was concern and anguish in her voice. Sitting across her table was a lab technician who had pricked himself while handling blood containing HIV. People call it needle stick injury. Like Lakshman in Ramayana, if this health worker was started on a course of antiretroviral medicines within the next 24 hours, he could be saved from HIV infection. But as luck would have it, the state did not have a single tablet with them to give to this health worker. Speak to him, she says, handing over the phone to this lab health worker. What would I do speaking with him all the way from Delhi? The Indian equivalent of the monkey god Hanuman, Indian Airlines, did not operate flights frequent enough for us to send the drugs from Delhi to Orissa. So I called a doctor in Calcutta, the nearest place to Orissa where the medicines were available, and he said, send the patient to me, I will give the drugs there. So I called back Orissa only to be told, how will we get train tickets at such short notice? Stop the train, ask the police to put the health worker and you on the train, I thundered. We had to break the rules to get access to the medicines. Today, these drugs are on the World Health Organization list of essential medicines, and they are widely available across Africa, Asia, and the rest of the world. But it wouldn't have been possible were it not for the activism of millions of people living with HIV and civil society organizations who took to the street and demanded access. And we might have to break the rules again if current trade agreements, bilateral trade agreements and regional trade agreements stop new drugs from being accessible to all. And without pressure, world leaders would not have committed the $16 billion that is spent each year on AIDS today. But this is not enough. And in fact, this amount is slowly being reduced. Yes, investments in AIDS increased by a staggering 5,000% in the last 15 years. But the total amount of money available for AIDS is just 1.5% of all health spending. So let's now go to and follow the rules. In Africa, AIDS accounts for nearly 7% of the disease burden, yet only 5% of the health budget is given to HIV. 12 years ago in Abuja, African leaders committed to provide 15% of the government revenue to health programs. Today, only a handful of countries do so. If that promise had been written into law, the resource situation would be very, very different. It would be like what it is in Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe's AIDS levy guarantees 3% of the income tax, personal and corporate, for the AIDS response. Today, they are going to generate about $30 million this year, money with which they are going to put an additional 70,000 people on HIV treatment. Yes, developing countries can do more, but they can't do it alone. Take the case of Kenya, for example. Kenya has doubled the amount of money it puts on AIDS in the last few years. Today, it spends $100 million, but it requires 7 times more. Where will they get this money? Yes, the economy of Kenya is growing. They can probably add 3 times more from their national coffers. But even when they do that, the total amount will only be half of what they require. The other half has to come from external sources. Can the world afford to wait for the economies of developing countries to grow before they can start looking after their people's health? As my boss, Michel Sidibe, says, if we do not pay now, we will have to pay more tomorrow and forever. Creating new rules of engagement. Before coming to Geneva, I lived in the African mountainous kingdom of Lesotho. It is one of the poorest countries in the world. Work is hard to find. People make the most of the rocky land to grow food. And many men and women go to South Africa, their only neighbor, to find work. I often took first-time visitors to the picturesque countryside. There I would show them a well-constructed and maintained building. That building would have electricity, a generator to back up if the electricity should fail, running water, a vehicle to transport people. And then I would ask them a quiz. Is this A, a church, B, a school, or C, a hospital? The answer? None of the above. The correct answer, sadly, is a funeral home. Death had become the biggest investment opportunity as AIDS ravaged Lesotho's young and able-bodied people day by day. Death had become so normalized that Saturdays were reserved for funerals. Even more worrisome was the fact that people took death insurance so that they can get a decent burial without further impoverishing their families. A death insurance got you a coffin, a tombstone, a cow to slaughter and feed the mourners who gather, and money to dig the grave. When people choose death insurance over life insurance, when burial societies are formed to ensure that the dead get a decent funeral, we know that we have failed our people while they were living. And this has to change. We have to value life over death. And to do that, we can actually learn from how the world runs its postal system. When I receive a letter from a friend of mine in India, it costs him about 30 Indian rupees, about 50 cents. And when I reply back, it costs about $5. Yet the costs of moving a letter from Chennai to Geneva and Geneva to Chennai are the same. The international rules that govern the postal system makes it possible for an equity-based shared responsibility of costs so that two friends can communicate with each other. Today, there must not be much mail traffic going around, but SMS messages through mobile phones between countries also operate under similar principles, even when they are dictated to by market conditions. Why can't we have a similar understanding for paying for global health? A global health guarantee system that ensures that everyone, regardless of where they live, whether it's in the remote mountains of Nepal or in downtown New York, is guaranteed access to health based on the principles of equity and the right to health. And why is this necessary? A little while earlier, I talked to you about the 6.5 million people who are on antiretroviral treatment. Each one of them has to remember to take these medicines regularly every day, sometimes 3 times a day. And they have to do this for the rest of their life. If they stop, they will die within a matter of months or a year. They simply can't afford to. But the reality is that people living with HIV depend upon their local clinics to give them the medicines regularly. The local clinics depend upon their governments, and the governments depend upon external aid. The reality is that people's lives depend upon institutions like the Global Fund and PEPFAR of the United States to receive political support from their leaders year after year, month after month, so that these people have guaranteed access to life-saving medicines. This is far too risky, and that is why we have to change the rules of engagement. One idea is to create a treaty-based binding system that pools in resources for global health of the rich and the poor, of every country, big or small, and distribute it according to internationally agreed norms for investments in health. In fact, such a treaty-based system should be inspired by the motto of the US Postal Service. That motto in the world of health would be, neither snow nor rain, nor heat nor gloom of night prevents us from the delivery of your right to health. Thank you very much.